Thursday, January 21st, 2021. For all of you who are here as individuals to speak to us today, I want to welcome you. Very glad that you signed up and looking forward to your testimony today. Just so that you know, this is an official Senate committee hearing where everything is recorded and broadcast. So I would ask that you please keep that in mind as we move throughout the course of the committee hearing. I would also ask that you please remember to keep your screen on mute. If you fail to do that, it becomes kind of difficult to conduct the hearing and interferes with the ability of everybody else to listen. So just please pay attention to that. The way we are going to proceed with the hearing today is, of course, this is on the agenda involving the rulemaking process to adopt the California Emission Standards here in Minnesota. In the Environment Committee yesterday, they covered the environmental issues that surround this initiative. And in it, they had the state agency that testified. They had interested groups that came in to testify. They had lobbyists that testified. What I wanted to do is invite the public to come in and testify, either pro or con, however or wherever you are at on this issue. But what I'm looking for is individuals, not people who are members of groups or lobbyists or state agency folks. Just people in the state of Minnesota who feel that they will be affected in one way or the other with these rules if they are in fact adopted. We've got a total of 17 testifiers, and of necessity, we've got a hard deadline of being done at 4:30. So of necessity, I have to limit your testimony, and I'm going to limit it at 3 minutes apiece. I will go through the list and call on individuals to testify, and when you get to your 3 minutes, believe me, I'm not trying to be impolite when I cut you off or ask you to stop. It's because if somebody early in the game talks too long, then the people at the end of the list won't get an opportunity to talk at all. And of course, that isn't fair. So just keep in mind that 3 minutes per testifier, and that will then give us an opportunity to allow the various members of the committee to ask questions of you when we have gone through the entire list. And I would ask the members to please withhold your questions of the testifiers until we are done with all 17 speakers. And at that time, we'll entertain your questions. So for the speakers, I hope you are able to hang around for the entire hour and a half because there may be some questions coming from members to you. Again, the context of this hearing is to find out how you feel the rules, if implemented, are going to affect you, whether you are in favor of those rules or you're not. That is really up to you. But what I want to hear from folks today is, how do you think these rules are going to affect you in your private life? With that, I think we're going to get started. I wanted to mention that we have about 41 pieces of information that have been submitted to us in the form of written testimony. And those written pieces of testimony have been posted on the Senate committee website, so you can access them there if you wish. Now, I think we are going to get started, and I will tell you, I'll give you a sort of at bat in the circle and on deck. So the first three speakers, we're going to begin with Mr. Kukanen, followed by Marlon Faye and Miranda, I think it's Gohan, and I apologize if I butcher last names. It's strictly unintended. So I'm going to call on Mr. Kukanen. Where are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am
there
here.
We go. Welcome to the committee. Please proceed with your 3 minutes of testimony.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators, for this opportunity. My name is Yuk Kukanen. I'm an EV owner here in Twin Cities, and I also teach EV market and technologies at the University of St. Thomas. So I wanted to provide that perspective too at the same time here. I will share my screen and show one slide here. So I will keep it up while I'm speaking. You should see it now. Can you see the slide that says EV is coming to the US market in 2021?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I have driven EVs for over 8 years now. And as you will hear from other EV owners, EVs are much better cars than traditional internal combustion engine cars. And I know that it's sometimes hard to understand that, but until you actually start driving one, but then you will get it. So that's a good thing that you have an opportunity to hear from the owners. So last year, US light-duty vehicle sales were down 14.4% overall. The only major manufacturer who saw real growth was Tesla, whose sales were up 20%. In Europe, the new emission regulations pushed auto manufacturers to provide more EVs available, and demand was clearly there. EV market share tripled from 3.3% to 10.2%, and over 1.4 million EVs were sold in Europe last year. Even in my country of origin, Finland, which is at the same latitude as Alaska and more sparsely populated than Minnesota, EV sales doubled from 7% to over 16%. And in neighboring Norway, 75% of all cars sold in there were electric. So EV sales grow fast when vehicles are available at the market, and cold climate does not slow down the sales. So far, most of the EVs available in the US market have been sedans and luxury crossovers, but that will change this year. As you can see from this slide, we are expecting manufacturers to start selling 21 new EV models in the US this year, and out of those, 17 are crossovers, SUVs, or pickup trucks, so we can expect these to sell well here if we just get these to Minnesota market. Last year, for example, Toyota started selling RAV4 Prime plug-in hybrid in the US, and they could sell exactly as many as they can bring to the market. Unfortunately, none of those are available in Minnesota.
I'd indicate you've got 30 seconds left.
Excellent, thank you very much. So EVs work well for Minnesotans. All of the EVs that you can see here on this side are available in four-wheel drive, and all of them have range over 200 miles and some of them over 400 miles. Those people who are still concerned about the range can always choose a plug-in hybrid model, so there are no range limitations. It is really time. All the surveys
show. Mr. Kukanen, you have now expired the 3 minutes, and I do not wish to be impolite, but if I allow you to go on by the time we get to the end of the list, we will run out of time.
Totally understand. 2 sentences short, but that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in. We really do appreciate it. Next, we have up Mr. Faye, Miranda Gohan on deck, and Skyler Johnson in the hole. Mr. Faye.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Newman and members of the committee for this opportunity. The California Clean Cars initiative coming forward, I see as a lot of problems for my industry. I'm 64 years old. I've been farming for 45 years, and California Air Resources Board has a long history of being anti-ethanol and anti-biofuels. You know, in our industry, I raise corn and soybeans, and that's been a big benefit to our industry. You know, it gives us an added value to our crop that we produce. It has a side effect added value of helping with cleaner air and it helps us with having a closer to break-even price when we go to sell our crop. If we adopt the clean California standards here in Minnesota, they're planning on putting a ban on new gas-powered vehicles by the year 2035. That's going to have a devastating effect on our biofuels industry for ethanol and biodiesel. And we've put a lot of money into those infrastructures and stuff here in Minnesota to benefit us. And, it's done a good job in helping support us and also in promoting clean air. Even now in Minnesota, we have much more choice to retailers in Minnesota for ethanol varieties than they do in California. That just leads me to believe that California is not going to have those standards in place that we do here in Minnesota. Another thing is being someone who's been a strong proponent of Minnesota agriculture and, new initiatives of value-added products in Minnesota. This just hampers one of the things that we've used for a value-added product here in Minnesota. We don't have any idea what the next set of rules coming out of California is going to be. And I guess that's one of my biggest problems with this rule is that, it's not Minnesotans making these rules. And I've heard both sides of the table, well, we're not going to have to follow all those rules. We can follow some different rules. As far as I know, there's two rules. There's the federal rules and there's the California rules. And I just think that it ought to be Minnesota citizens that are making these rules. So it just makes me nervous. It puts a lot of uncertainty into our agricultural industry here in Minnesota. And I see that as a real problem.
New California. 30 seconds.
Okay. New California car regulations will make trucks and gas powered vehicles, more expensive. And there's a whole range of figures on, how much it will be. I think it's definitely going to be higher price. Some of that will be to help offset the price of the new electric vehicles over the gas vehicles. Here in rural Minnesota, outside the Twin Cities, a lot of people drive trucks and, especially
Mr. Faye,
farmers.
You are now out of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your views with us. We really do appreciate it. Next up is Miranda Gohan, followed by Skyler Johnson and Will Steeger. Miranda Gohan, please. I am not seeing her. I'm going to just give another moment. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to access this, but I am not seeing her on the picture.
Mr. Chair.
There we come. See, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Ms. Gohan, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Miranda Gohan. I have experience in the auto industry on the sales side. Prior to getting into the automotive industry, I despised buying cars, just the process of it. I accidentally got into it. Once in, I used to teach classes on how to purchase cars and help break down barriers, help empower customers, which made my job a lot easier. Most of my experience was in Aberdeen, South Dakota, being my hometown. So a lot of my customers, I sold from trucks, 1 ton, 3/4 ton for farmers, ranchers. In fact, I was on the Chamber Ag Committee there, to minivans, to wide range, just about all kinds of other vehicles. Most of them were used. And a lot of those folks, they're pretty frugal, pretty fiscally conservative. So I did everything I could to reduce the risk as far as that. What appeals to me about electric cars, and I recognize the benefits as far as environmental and also public health, is I'm looking at it as a frugal economic issues, that they have less moving parts, they're lower cost of ownership. For someone like me and other customers that I used to help, I see this as a way to save money and still be able to provide for transportation needs. And, keep in mind that has to suit what their needs and expectations are as far as a vehicle. The other thing that I'm looking at too is also dealerships. As we go forward with these clean car rules, I'd just like to make sure that our dealers are not placed at a competitive disadvantage. Quite the opposite, that they can benefit from this. From being in that industry, I look at the profit centers in the dealership, how they can adapt, and also how they can help out the customers too. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gohan, for appearing, and thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Skyler Johnson, followed by Will Steeger, with Peter Jacques-Sellers in the hole. Skyler Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you
Welcome.
for having me today. My name's Skyler Johnson. I am a stay-at-home mom to 4 beautiful, young, rambunctious girls. My husband is the sole income earner for our family, and we own a small hobby farm. We use the farm to grow our food for the year. We heavily rely on everything here, from carrots to potatoes and cows and chickens. And this mandate is going to hurt our family. On our farm, we have 3 vehicles. One is just for me and the kids, and it's the first new vehicle that we've ever bought. We've been looking forward to buying another new farm truck, brand new, the second nice new vehicle this farm's ever seen. This is not going to help my family. When we look at cars, we are looking at the price. We're looking at what we need to use it for and how safe it is for our kids. Having to spend an extra $1,000 to $2,000 or more on a new farm vehicle is going to make us have to choose if we can afford that vehicle or afford 2 more calves to feed my family for the year. It's going to make us say, hey, these 500 chickens that we wanted to order and raise up and share with the rest of our family, my sister, my parents, we can't buy them because we had to buy this vehicle. It will directly take food out of our mouths to feed my kids. And that's not right. And then our other vehicle, which is my husband's daily traveler, that one's almost gone too, and we need to buy a new one. It's going to make us not be able to afford new vehicles and make us buy something that's not going to last nearly as long or put up to the toll that a farm takes, having to transport livestock, having to haul trailers and hay bales. It's also going to hurt us in the future if this limits us on our tractor use. We have Alice Chalmers from the 1930s. They're older than I am, and we don't even have titles for. What's going to happen when we have to bale hay? And we can't because we don't have a tractor that's up to these kind of standards. It's just not right for Minnesotans, and it's not right for people living in rural communities who don't have the finances that a college professor does. It's not fair, and it's not going to be okay for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for coming in and testifying today. Next, we have Will Steeger, followed by Peter Jacques-Sellers, followed by Bud Stone. Mr. Steeger. Mr. Steeger, you are muted. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
There we are. Thank you.
There we go.
Senator, yes.
Welcome.
Will Steeger, represented by Climate Generation. I'm here talking about on behalf of the climate. I wanted to put this in context a little bit about clean energy, the evolution of that. 16 years ago, we had a major meeting with 40 of the national nonprofit leaders to talk about coal. How would we transfer from coal to renewables? And the goal back then in 2004 was, how do we stop the 155 coal plants that were planned and close the 300 to 400 existing coal plants. At the same time, building a renewable industry to make up the difference of electricity. And number 4 was to explore energy efficiency and to build out the new clean and equitable clean energy economy. And this all started, of course, with policy. In 2007, we passed the Next Generation Energy Act.
Mr. Steeger, the purpose of the hearing today is to talk specifically about the proposed rule adoption and the California standards. If you would please address that.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Okay, I'll talk about, the solar prices and so forth, but I can talk on behalf of the climate. There's a need to get into electrification of our transportation system. And as we see today, there are challenges. But on the climate, we're basically out of time. We don't have 10 years or 5 years. We can't wait another year.
Mr. Steeger, the purpose of the hearing today is the California Emission Standards. The environmental issues were discussed in the Environment Committee yesterday.
Okay. Sorry for the misunderstanding then. And, I'm not prepared then to talk about the exact details of the California standards.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I apologize for any misunderstanding, Mr. Steeger, but again, the title of the committee hearing today is the impact of the proposed adoption of the California Emission Standards on Minnesotans. We were not prepared to talk about environmental impacts, but
Okay.
I do appreciate the fact that you have shown up, and I would indicate you and I met years and years and years ago. It's good to see you again. So thank you, Mr. Steeger.
My apologies to everybody.
Next up is Peter Jacques-Sellers, followed by Bud Stone and Stu Henry in the hole. Mr. Peter Jacques-Sellers.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to testify, and thank you, members of the committee. In addition to being concerned about the climate impacts of this rule, I just bought my first car recently. It was a used car, and I plan on buying a new car relatively soon, and so I'm thinking about that. And I would like to be able to buy an electric car, and therefore it's very important for me to have more options. It increases the likelihood that I'm able to find the type of electric vehicle that I want. When I bought my recent car, it was a hybrid, and one of the problems I had was that there was a small selection. I had to buy a small hatchback, and I wish that I could have found probably a different type of vehicle as a hybrid. I'd probably buy a larger vehicle, a vehicle that was better off-road, possibly even have bought a truck if that had been available as a hybrid. And so I'm very much hoping that when I buy my next vehicle, I could buy an electric vehicle that would be a truck or something that was more capable off-road. So I view the Clean Cars initiative as really boosting the chances that I would be able to find the type of vehicle that I'm looking for from a consumer choice perspective. I'm also a young person. I don't have as much money as some other people. And so the fact that there are lower maintenance costs for electric vehicles is something that's especially appealing to me, and something that I believe would save me money over the course of the lifetime that I own the vehicle. And then the other thing is that I want to be able to use this vehicle all around the state. I happen to live in St. Paul now, but I spend a lot of time outside of the Twin Cities. I may not live in the Twin Cities in the future, and it's very important to me that I have access to the charging infrastructure that would enable me to use the vehicle all over the state. And I think that the Clean Car Rule, which would see more electric vehicles being sold, would spur an increase in the building of the charging infrastructure. And so I want to just note that the effects of the rule go beyond the vehicles that are available at dealerships, but they affect the whole lay of the land in terms of EVs around the state. And so that's something that's also very important to me. Again,
Mr.
I would
Sellers,
like
you have 30 seconds.
Yes, again, I would like to have a larger selection of vehicles, electric vehicles, when I buy my next car. I want them to be able to be used across the state. I'm looking forward to the lower maintenance cost of electric vehicles. And it's important that when more vehicles are being sold, the general infrastructure to support them is superior. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Next up, we have Bud Stone, followed by Stu Henry, followed by Gary, I think it's Thiebert. Mr. Stone, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Bud Stone, and I am the president and CEO of the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, up north where we call it the land of the mines and pines. I work for a business advocacy organization that's supported by about 450 business members. And our major concern, and mine as well, is that we feel some reservations about imposing California emission standards on Minnesota citizens and businesses without input from elected officials and members of the state legislature. In short, I feel that Minnesota is not California, and handing over Minnesota's regulatory authority to an unelected bureaucracy that's about 1,700 miles away, in my opinion, is extremely poor policy at best. As far as the effects on our communities, this proposed action, if implemented, would have an extremely negative effect on our automobile dealers, especially in our rural communities, because they will be mandated to stock vehicles that, for them, they'll be difficult to sell. You have to keep in mind that automobile dealers seldom own the vehicles on their lots, but they floor plan them until they are sold and pay them off then. So adding inventory that'll cost them more money will affect their ability to remain profitable, and in turn that will limit their ability to support their communities as they do now by sponsoring school bands, hockey teams, baseball teams, and contributing to our local nonprofits. I think everybody knows if they're from rural Minnesota, the local automobile dealers have long been the go-to place for youth sports, school programs, and especially our rural communities. We also believe that incentives would be a much better way to encourage people to purchase lower emission vehicles. How about instead of forcing dealers to stock inventory that they may not be able to sell at a profit, wouldn't it be better to work to pass legislation that would reward customers for making that choice? I found in my careers that supply does not create demand, demand creates demand. And in closing, I would like to point out that right now, I believe is not the time to create more barriers for our businesses, but instead it's a great time to plan for the future. Government's job should be to provide services and create opportunities and not mandate business practices. And as a footnote, I've been with the Chamber of Commerce here in Grand Rapids for 21 years. And prior to that, I spent 28 years in the automobile business. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll stand for later questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Next up is Stu Henry, followed by Gary Thiebert, and then Barb Draper. Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So my name is Stu Henry, and I strongly support the clean car rule. Since 2017, I've been driving a Nissan Leaf electric vehicle, which I bought used. It's a great car. It's quiet, it accelerates quickly, and requires very little maintenance. I've never had a problem starting it, even in the coldest days when it's been outside. I drive it during the day and then charge it up overnight in my garage, which is incredibly convenient. And because it has no tailpipe emissions and the electric grid is becoming cleaner, and because EVs use power more efficiently, I've reduced my own carbon footprint significantly. I talked to a lot of people about my car, and it's clear to me that more people would buy electric cars if they had more choices, particularly SUVs and pickups. Cars are available in other states who have adopted the clean car standard that are not available here. Right now, Toyota is selling a RAV4 plug-in hybrid with a 42-mile all-electric range, and then it goes into a gas mode for a reasonable price. It's not sold here. Sometime next year, Ford will start selling an all-electric F-150. People, your constituents, are going to want that truck. But who knows when will be available, because the initial trucks will go to the ZEV states. There appears to be a lot of misinformation on this call about what the clean car standard will do. It will not limit your options to buy any other car. It's not been just adopted in California. It's been adopted in a number of states. And finally, the rule here won't be effective until 2025. So if you're buying a car next week or next month, it's not going to impact you at all. So again, I just want to emphasize, I think this rule increases consumer choice and consumer choice that your constituents are going to want to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Next up, we have Mr. Thiebert, followed by Barb Draper, followed by Oakley Smith. Mr. Thiebert.
Thank you for having me. We talked about car dealers, and since I am one, our dealership is in a town of Red Lake Falls, Minnesota. It's 40 miles east of Grand Forks, North Dakota. So we deal with a lot with the North Dakotans, and to the east is the Red Lake Nation. So we get involved with some great people that direction. I noticed a couple things that we're talking about as far as my concern is, should we have California emissions tell us how to do this, or should we as Minnesotans decide how to do this? Because what I'm seeing in the next 2 years, I'm going to have 9 vehicles to offer in my little community that are EVs. Currently, we've sold 1 in the last 2 years. The biggest problem up here, we don't have the infrastructure to charge them. And so do we want to put the cart before the horse? Should we wait till we have availability as Minnesotans to charge these vehicles and get around the state? Or should we force this through the California system and not make our own? The other problem I have is because we are small, the majority of vehicles I sell are used. And you guys have all heard of program vehicles, which are like company vehicles, off-lease vehicles, things that we sell with few miles on. If it has less than 7,500 miles on it, California considers it a new car. So I looked in my list of vehicles today that I go out and buy from General Motors. And of those, in the Chevys, there is 235 vehicles I could buy. Of that, 31 have YF5, which is the code for California emissions. So instead of finding you the vehicle you want, I'm limited down to those 31s. I'm also a Buick dealer, and in Buick today, there's 199, and of that, 16 of them have the YF5 emissions. So, Mike, I agree with you. We should go electric, and we should do it as soon as we possibly can with our rules and the way we want to do it, not the way California wants to do it. I don't think the point system and everything else has to be done up here. And I think we could decide how we want to do it. Just to give you an idea, Hibbing right now has got a Chevrolet Bolt they've had for 275 days. Fergus Falls has a Bolt they've had for 282 days. Stillwater has had one for 286. So I'm just showing you some rural dealers have had electric cars for quite a while. We just don't have the infrastructure yet. Let's do that first, and then let's worry about what we're going to do as Minnesotans. We don't need California to tell us.
Mr. Thiebert, you're just about out of time. If you could wrap up, please.
All right, and that's about all I've got to say. As a car dealer, I think we will offer the models, and I know that General Motors is talking about up to 30 units we will have for you. You will have the units to buy. Don't let California control how you do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thiebert. Next up, we have Barb Draper, followed by Oakley Smith, and then Sam Anderson. Ms. Draper.
Hello. Thank you, Senator Newman and senators. I had thought that the impacts on Minnesotans would include climate change, but I am understanding that you don't want that talked about.
That's correct, Ms. Draper. That was covered in a Senate hearing yesterday. So what we're looking for is the California Emission Standards, with respect to the vehicles that affect you.
Right. So the vehicles that would affect me, I'm a grandmother, and what affects me is what's going to happen to my grandchildren and what this world is going to be like. And that's where clean car standards come in. So there's no getting away from electric vehicles affecting climate change and the environment as a whole. I mean, that's what it's all about, really. Exploding tick populations here and Lyme disease, floods in Minnesota, crops that don't grow because of droughts, and my grandchildren and what kind of world they're going to live in. it's all about, too, if we forget climate change, it's like, let's get down to choice. I mean, chambers of commerce all over are about providing choice and bringing product to market. So I don't understand the resistance to increasing the supply of electric vehicles so consumers will have a choice. Right now, we're saying, let's restrict the choice for reasons that I don't quite understand, because nobody's taking away a gas-powered pickup truck if they want one. They can still have their gas-powered pickup truck, and other people might want an electric vehicle. So I don't understand why we're trying to not have the supply available to people. I guess just the idea of giving consumers a wider choice, lowering their fuel and maintenance costs, and as more of these vehicles are sold, the cost of the actual vehicle will be coming down. That's what always happens with supply and demand curves. We all know about that. And so this isn't limiting anybody's choice. In fact, it's expanding choice. And I'm still a grandmother and I still care about my grandchildren. And even though climate change is not the subject of this, I would like a nice world for them to live in. And that's what electric vehicles give them a chance to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Draper. Next up, we have Oakley Smith, followed by Sam Anderson, followed by Philip Adam. Oakley Smith, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me the chance to testify today. I haven't done a lot of public speaking before, so hopefully people can be patient with me. But yeah, I'm here today because I fully support the Clean Cars rules. Just a bit about me. I live in Uptown Minneapolis, actually right off Hennepin Avenue. As I'm sure some of you know, it is one of the busiest streets in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So right now, I don't actually own a car. Mostly I bus or I walk where I need to go. But nevertheless, the Clean Cars rule is still something that absolutely affects me. And really, it affects all of us, given that we all pretty much breathe the same air. So as I understand it, the main point of the Clean Cars rule is to reduce barriers to consumers to buy and drive electric vehicles and low emission vehicles, or EVs or LEVs, including hybrids. So it would be an important but also I think a practical step towards goals like energy independence and just cleaner air in general. But right now, Minnesotans have very few EV and LEV options available to them. Really, all I see is a few Priuses, a few Teslas, and that's about it. And the current selection of EVs really doesn't actually mirror consumer demand. So just for example, some models that are really popular in other states are hard or impossible to find here, as some other people had mentioned. As far as health, in Minnesota, we average around 2,000 to 4,000 deaths per year due to air pollution. And most of that pollution is from transportation, specifically cars. So even more common than that are other illnesses, making it literally harder for people to breathe, like asthma and COPD. Both my nephew and my mom suffer from conditions like that, and I'm sure more people that I'm not even aware of. So it's also worth noting that low-income communities and communities of color face a disproportionate share of these health conditions. So the proposed rule is modeled after Clean Car Standards already adopted, not just by California, by over a dozen states.
Mr. Smith, you've got about 30 seconds.
Thank you. Over a dozen states and DC. Even if at this point it's too late for Minnesota to lead on this, we can at least avoid being among the last to adopt it, or at least something comparable. So right now, I think the best way to do that is to let the NPCA do its job and protect the rights of Minnesotans to breathe clean air. I don't have any problem with this being passed by the legislature, but as far as I can tell, the legislature hasn't passed it or anything similar. And ultimately, I care a lot more about reaching these goals and implementing the Clean Cars rule, and I care much less about how we accomplish that. And in fact, as a regular Minnesotan,
Mr. Smith, you are long out of time. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off.
No problem.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sam Anderson, followed by Philip Adam, followed by Hannah Schultz. Mr. Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
I am Sam Anderson, President and CEO of Bay and Bay Transportation, a Minnesota-based, family-owned business with over 400 trucks and 600 employees. Our company has had a long-standing commitment to put the safest and most environmentally friendly equipment on the road. I believe that proposed regulation to adopt California's vehicle emission standards, while well-intentioned, will have serious negative impacts on my business and thousands of jobs in the state of Minnesota. Though the proposed rule does not currently include heavy-duty Class 7-8 commercial trucks, by linking our policies to California, we are on a clear path to do just that. California is working to develop regulations that outright ban all diesel-powered heavy-duty commercial trucks by 2045, and sooner in some vocations. Bay and Bay used to pick up and deliver in the state of California, and we stopped doing so 5 years ago because it was unprofitable and we couldn't continue to do it. The California Air Resources Board, or known as CARB, adopted regulations that made it financially unfeasible to operate there. To operate a 2021 diesel-powered tractor trailer in California, I would have to spend at least another $3,500 per unit. CARB itself estimates that electrified trucks will cost an additional $86,000. That means a 57% increase in the cost of a truck. Every challenge faced by passenger car electrification is magnified for heavy trucks. Range is a major concern. Modern trucking is based on reliable fueling stations frequently spaced across the markets they serve. My average run is 750 miles. With 200 gallons of fuel on board at 7 miles per gallon, my trucks can predictably travel 1,400 miles between fueling and serve multiple customers without refueling. The best electric trucks have a range of only 200 miles between recharging. The new infrastructure needed to provide fast and predictable heavy truck recharging will be both massive and costly. We were early adopters of natural gas as fuel for our trucks, but had to abandon them due to the lack of infrastructure. Equally critical is deploying repair facilities and technicians equipped to service electric trucks. Truck electrification simply will not work without the proper infrastructure. Unlike the typical commuter, truck drivers are limited to 14 hours on duty any given day. Fueling time matters. It typically takes 15 minutes to fuel a truck with diesel. A so-called electric quick charge takes between 90 and 120 minutes, cutting into precious driver hours and their wage earning capacity. Battery weight will also cut into payload hauling capacity.
Mr. Anderson, you are about out of time. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll conclude with this. I believe that any changes to Minnesota's vehicle emission standards should be vetted through a vigorous legislative process rather than agency rulemaking. Incentives rather than mandates should be the basis, and most importantly, it should fit Minnesota's unique economy, climate, and geography, and not be tied to a state like California. Thank you for your opportunity. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Next up, we have Philip Adam, followed by Hannah Schultz, followed by Bill Middlecamp. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Chairman Senator Newman, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Philip Adam, a resident of Plymouth, Minnesota for 35 years, and I've driven electric vehicles for over 7 years. I love their simplicity, their 3-cent per mile energy cost, almost non-existent maintenance, and sports car type performance. What I really want you to know today is that it's actually gas car owners who will greatly benefit from the rapid adoption of electric vehicles. Imagine if 20% of automobiles are electric, which reduces demand for gasoline by 20%, as happened recently with COVID. Just a 30-cent per gallon drop puts an extra $1 billion per year in the pockets of hardworking Minnesotans. Further, rapid adoption of electric vehicles will benefit all electric ratepayers. It's a bit counterintuitive. First, power companies will sell more electricity to charge vehicles. Now their fixed costs are spread out over a larger volume of sales, and this drives down costs for all ratepayers. Second, wind power is the lowest cost electric energy source. With a significant quantity of electric cars, now we have a fleet of rolling batteries allowing utility companies to maximize the benefits of wind power and thus provide us citizens with stable, lowest cost power. So I'd suggest to you that we adopt these rules to send a market signal to all the utilities to rapidly invest in the infrastructure necessary to transition to electric cars. Further, rapid adoption of electric vehicles will put a much higher quantity of used EVs on the market. Those with lower incomes stand to benefit the most as they tend to spend a higher percentage of their income on transportation. And since many homes are multi-car households, used vehicles are a great way to enter the market, as Stu Henry so eloquently told us in his testimony. And by the way, I have an acquaintance who buys off-peak power from Dakota Electric. His energy cost is 1 penny per mile, not a dime per mile, a penny per mile. Thus, there are hundreds of dollars per electric vehicle car in annual benefits to all Minnesota citizens, regardless as to whether or not we own an EV or not. The truth is that electric cars and renewable energy are some of the most democratizing forces available to us as citizens and can free us from the fossil fuel auto industry that dominates our lives. A highly centralized refinery concentrates power in the hands of the very few. Electric cars, wind turbines, solar panels, and power walls in our homes decentralize power. It literally and politically puts the power closer to each of us as citizens. All this points to the probability that EV sales will easily exceed 7%.
About 30 seconds, Mr. Adam.
Thank you. All this points to the probability that EV sales will easily exceed 7% if the public understood all the benefits. Rather than fight the inevitable market forces, let's lead. Let's stop subsidizing fossil fuel. Let's do a simple thing and send a market signal that Minnesota wants to lead. Let's approve the adoption of clean car rules and encourage utilities to plan for infrastructure to accelerate this transition. For all Minnesotans will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Next up, we have Hannah Schultz, followed by Bill Middlecamp with Bruce Parker in the hole. Hannah Schultz, please. Is she on? I am not seeing Hannah Schultz. And my staff is saying that they're not seeing her on here either. Okay, I'm going to move on. If Hannah Schultz is on or trying to get on as she appears on the screen, I will recognize her. In the meantime, next up is Bill Middlecamp, followed by Bruce Parker. And then the final speaker is Brian Thalman. Bill Middlecamp, please.
Thank you, Senator Newman and members of the committee. I want to say, although I won the genetic lottery on hair color, I am a senior, I am on Medicare, and I live on Social Security. And I want to talk about the electric vehicle advantages for seniors who are retired. These advantages include significantly lower cost of operation and maintenance, lower total cost of ownership, easier to store for unused for extended periods, immunity to the short trip damage that gas cars suffer, easier and more intuitive to operate, and better performance in snow. And I'll address these in more detail now. First of all, EVs are far more efficient. I can drive 150 miles on the cost of 1 gallon of gas. EVs do not need oil changes, belts, filters, spark plugs, tune-ups, timing belts, and so on that are necessary for internal combustion cars. So the maintenance costs are much lower. Even regenerative braking, which improves the efficiency and also reduces brake wear, lowers brake maintenance costs as well. Although EVs tend to cost more and have a special tax applied for roads, the total cost of ownership is lower versus equivalent classes of internal combustion cars. Although the availability of used EVs is still low, the total cost for a used EV can be exceptionally low. Now, many seniors are snowbirds, escaping our winters to warmer climates. Internal combustion vehicles need fuel treatment and battery minders to minimize damage from long periods without use. But EVs are immune to many of these problems, and some EVs will even automatically maintain their low voltage 12-volt battery indefinitely. Now, retirees may find that most of their driving is short distance, and especially in this pandemic, local community trips without the longer work commutes that they had before retirement. Short trips accelerate wear and tear on ICE cars. They need to run for several minutes to replace the starting energy in the battery and to warm the oil and exhaust system to minimize the buildup of acids that damage the car. EVs are immune to these issues. Internal combustion engines have an inherent lag effect in driving that comes from the physical traits of their motors. EVs are much more intuitive with almost instantaneous connection between accelerator and power in both acceleration and braking. And this is a small but an important advantage for seniors who experience an age-related decline in reaction time. EVs have more even weight distribution, lower in the vehicle, which results in better handling. They're inherently better at traction control because of the instantaneous power control I mentioned earlier. This gives them excellent handling in snow. Hopefully, I've been clear.
You've got about 30 seconds, Mr. Middlecamp.
Thank you. Hopefully, I've been clear in sharing some of the advantages I have experienced from owning a Nissan Leaf since 2012 and a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid since 2018. There are reasons that EVs are not a panacea for every senior's transport needs, but no one is forced to convert to an EV before they're ready. However, there are market barriers to EV ownership, preventing some seniors from taking advantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Middlecamp. We next have Bruce Parker, followed by Mr. Thalman. Bruce Parker, please.
Unmute. I think I've successfully unmuted. This is Bruce Parker. I'm a career emergency physician who has paid attention to injury prevention and sort of system analysis of how systems work. I am a supporter of the clean car rule adoption because we don't get to make up our own. We get to choose between the federal rules, which we're likely to change again with this new administration, or the 177 state rules headlined by California, but they've been adopted by the other 11 and a half states. These are a better bet. I look at the health costs of climate change. It's worse in Arizona than it is here. And I want to second that the air quality along heavily used transit corridors is worse. The primary exposure population is the people that live there, poor people of color, but also the drivers of the vehicles that are polluting. And we will make significant progress. This rule will not solve all the problems, and some market sectors will be disadvantaged, others will be advantaged. Overall, I think it's a better deal than not. Most of the complaints about this will be a problem with returning to the more stringent federal rules from the Obama administration. About a third of the vehicle sales in North America currently are following these clean car rules, none of them have caused huge problems. I don't know, reading that we will have to follow California. What parts of California laws will be forced to follow? If something's terrible, expect a revolution. Hopefully, it's quiet and dignified. And we're not held at all to Gavin Newsom's banning of internal combustion engines. That's an administrative order that's outside the clean car rules.
Mr. Parker, you have 30 seconds.
That's enough. That's enough. Thank you.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I edited everything that somebody else said.
Well, thank you, Mr. Parker. Finally, we have Mr. Thalman.
Hi, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brian Thalman. I farm 2,000 acres of corn and soybeans near Plato in Chair Newman's district, together with my son and father, and operate a soybean seed cleaning facility. I am a past president and corn board member of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. I'm here today on behalf of our 6,500 members to discuss the negative impact that the California Vehicle Emission Standards could have on Minnesota's ag sector. A couple of fellow corn farmers and I met with the MPCA over the summer, requesting that they consider the impact on agriculture and biofuels while they were developing the rule and regulatory analysis. We are disappointed to see very minimal mention of biofuels in information that has since come forth. We have heard today about the regulatory uncertainty that these standards could bring. What happens when California changes the rules? These rules have been written in locations that don't have renewable fuel production or take that into account. E15, for example, is currently not approved in California. Testing is underway, but California rules would prohibit E15 use. Based on MPCA's regulatory analysis, we estimate that California vehicle emission standards would reduce biofuel usage between 70 and 100 million gallons for the first 10 years of the rule. As a corn farmer, ethanol is an important local market for the corn we grow, and we are very concerned about the negative effects that the California Clean Car Rule would have. Ethanol plants, or biorefineries as I like to refer to them, extract value from the corn kernel, including ethanol, high-value livestock feed, and corn oil, all at the same time from the same corn kernel. Our family is a 20-year member owner of Heartland Corn Products in Winthrop, Minnesota. All 900 member owners take pride in owning a facility that adds value to their crop while adding significant economic value to the region as a whole and providing multiple benefits to Minnesota's economy, consumers, and communities. Ethanol is a cleaner burning fuel that helps to improve air quality by reducing particulate emissions and has lower carbon emissions compared to gasoline. Increased ethanol blends provide benefits to the entire state. Minnesota has long been a national leader in biofuels policy. We are the first state to require ethanol blended fuels in 1997 and have made additional strides since then. Our current standard is at 10%. Now that the federal government has lifted the artificial barrier to year-round sales of 15% biofuel blends, it is time for Minnesota to lead again and be the first state to adopt a 15% statewide biofuel standard. Increasing biofuel usage and higher blends of ethanol in our state's gasoline supply was a recommendation in the 2019 MnDOT Pathways Report to decarbonize the transportation sector and the Governor's Council of Biofuels, on which I serve. Minnesota could increase the biofuels content standards today and begin reducing greenhouse gas emissions now,
Mr.
rather
Thalman,
than waiting
you're
until
just about out of time. If you could
2025.
wrap up, please.
Yep, I'm all done. Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. My timing is sometimes not very good. Thank
problem.
you. We have now run through the entire list. I do not see Hannah Schultz on the screen anywhere, so I assume she has dropped off. So we can now go to member questions, and staff is kind of keeping a running list for me. First up is Senator Yazinski. Senator Yazinski, you seem to be muted. You're still muted, Senator. Okay, we're gonna go to Senator Kiffmeyer, see if you can figure out what the problem is. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Having gone through several of these now, I've learned the convenience of using the space bar as a quicker way than trying to find the unmute button, if that's helpful to anybody. And also, if you just let it go, you're back on mute. But thank you, Mr. Chair. After listening to all of these presenters who are for the California Emission Standards, it makes you just think why it's so wonderful to just go out and buy them. And I hear them as they're wonderful sales pitches and how happy they are. And if that indeed is the case, one of the things I found in the market is that then the market will respond to that great news and they will choose on their own. The market has a very efficient way of getting the word around, and these folks are all well able to make that information available, as they've been able to do so today for our committee. But it reminds me of the CFL fiasco when there was mandates and you had to leave the incandescent light bulb and you had to go to the CFL, even though it had mercury and it was dangerous if it broke. Many other things like that. And shortly after, the LED came on board, and which doesn't have any of those things. Very efficient, very good use, and the market has quickly adopted it. Things that are really, really worthwhile. And all those Minnesotans out there, we aren't the only ones who care about the environment or pollution. They do. They've spoken up today. But many of these are also business people who have a very practical kind of thing. So I don't think the California emission standards are needed at all. I think that the market itself will take us there, and it will take us there more quickly and in a more fair way to all of Minnesota. So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make that comment right now and appreciate the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. I'm going to call on Senator Johnson Stewart next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank all of our testifiers and just share a similar situation. My husband and I recently were looking for a second car. We have a huge gas guzzling truck that we enjoy taking all around the state, but we wanted a small SUV for local trips. And frankly, with all due respect to those who say market forces will increase demand, I have to disagree. I was not able to find any SUV that was an electric vehicle that was less than $70,000. The only one I could find, and we looked for months, was a Mercedes. Now, I don't know about other people, but I simply cannot afford or will not choose to spend $70,000 on an electric SUV. And that, frankly, was the only one that was available. I can't buy a new car, so that was the only used SUV that I could find. So my husband and I chose to buy a hybrid Toyota, and we will continue to hope that more choice becomes available. So for me, I think if we had more choices, we definitely would see more of that, more use of electric vehicles, and I just wanted to share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next up is Senator Izinski. We're going to try you again. You still aren't coming through. I have no idea, so we're gonna pass on Senator Izinski and go to Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually do have a question for one of our testifiers, but I want to preface it with saying that, you know, just as a mother, I completely agree that we want to look out for the environment. My children are going to be swimming in Minnesota waters, breathing Minnesota air, and I don't think there's anybody here saying that we shouldn't care about the environment. It is about whether the California emission standards are the most practical way to get more electrical vehicles into the market, or if we should have all Minnesotans have a voice and input and go through a legislative process and make it our own way. And, you know, on the other hand, as a mother, our testifier, Ms. Skyler Johnson, brought up a point that I'd like her to elaborate on a little bit when she spoke about her concerns with safety when going to purchase vehicles for her family moving forward. You only briefly touched on that. Would you mind elaborating on your concerns with that?
And Senator Coleman, the question is to which testifier?
Ms. Skyler Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so when we're vehicle shopping, a lot of the older vehicles, they're really rusted. Minnesota uses salt, which I think is awesome. It helps keep us safe when we're driving in the winter and keeps the roads clear, but it also really degrades the vehicles that are older and used and would be in our price budget if we had to buy used. And when you're looking at that, the brake lines a lot of times go out and we have to get those replaced. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has been through that. And then not only that, thinking about the 4 kids that I have in my car, I want to make sure that they make it home if there's an accident. Those older vehicles, they don't have the side airbags for car seats. They don't have the anchors for car seats to keep them all safe. I mean, all 4 of my kids, they're 7, 3, 2, and
4 months old. They're all in car seats. They all need those car seat anchors to keep them safe and keep them alive if, God forbid, there is an accident. And those older vehicles, they just don't have it. And so this bill would affect us having to buy something that's not up to our safety standards and could really endanger our family.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Senator Coleman, did you have a follow-up or should I move on?
No follow-ups, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Senator Yazinski wants to try one more time.
Sorry, I've been having technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. I apologize for that. I had a speaker set up and it didn't work. So I want to also thank all the testifiers, some very interesting testimony. I also enjoyed the testimony of Mr. Thiebert. So I checked with my auto dealer locally who sells quite a few cars, actually sold 990 cars last year. I asked him how many electrical vehicles did he sell, and he sold 2. I did the math, that's 0.2%. I've been familiar with this operation for a long time growing up. And I still stand behind the supply and demand. If he has to stock 20-some% electrical vehicles, he's going to have to reduce the supply of trucks that he's going to sell. The majority of his sales are trucks, SUVs, and things like that. So by reducing the number that he can have available in those, there's going to be a higher demand for those. Because there's a higher demand and they're tougher to get, it's going to increase the price of the trucks and the SUVs and things like that. Also, if he has to stock 20-some% of electrical vehicles, he has to do what's called floor planning those cars. So he has to pay for them and pay the interest on those vehicles while he waits to sell them. If he cannot sell those vehicles, he then has to discount those vehicles. So lots of things happening by mandating of what this is. Now, I think all manufacturers and dealers are looking at going to electric vehicles at some point, but to put a mandate on them and take the way of the free market system on how cars are supplied and demand, I believe is not correct. Again, and then going to the second last thing I have is the legislative process. We here in Minnesota are elected as officials to have a legislative process to weigh in on what we're doing with our things such as this. By turning it over to the California standards, we are eliminating our voice. And as you see on this call, there are many different voices from many different parts of the state. Now, I don't know how many ethanol plants Senator Dibble has, or Senator Carlson has, or Senator McEwen has, or Senator Johnson Stewart have in their districts, but I have 2 in mind, 2 ethanol plants that will be affected by these regulations. So I do not think this is something that we should have a mandate on. I think the market should do it, and we should have a legislative process to input on how this is done. And last point is, by doing this, we are disincentivizing the neighboring states to doing business in Minnesota. A lot of car dealers will do auto or dealer trades, and now they have to go through the process of having California car standards. A lot of border towns have vehicles that are being purchased by neighboring states that come in to our bordering towns, and now having higher standards on our local car dealers is disincentivizing our local dealerships. And I don't believe this is fair. With that, thank you again for everybody testifying.
Thank you, Senator Yazinski. Next up is Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions for the Mr. Thiebert. I believe he's the auto dealer. Could we unmute him? I'd like to ask him a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Thiebert, auto dealers, they sell products to people. And is it correct? Is it my understanding on how auto dealers work in that when you get your stock, let's say you buy 100 vehicles, or what you want 100 vehicles to sell on your lot. In order for you to sell them, you buy them from the manufacturer, correct? You actually purchase them from the manufacturer to put them on your lot, correct?
Mr. Thiebert.
Correct. It's okay. As soon as you order it, you have usually 15, 20 days that gives them enough time to deliver it, then you own it.
Okay.
Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Thiebert, so if you have to, let's say arbitrarily, you have 100 cars that you purchase, and by this rule, you will have to arbitrarily purchase 20 out of the 100 to be electric vehicles. So you'll have 20 vehicles on your lot. If you don't sell those vehicles as time goes by, what happens at the end of the model year when those 20 vehicles don't sell because there isn't demand or people don't necessarily want to buy those vehicles? What happens?
Mr. Thiebert.
Oh, okay. So what I brought up there is the one I was showing that the 3 dealers that have these vehicles that are still in their lots, those are 2020s. And what General Motors has done is they've tried to incentivize them to move them out. And of course, currently in Minnesota, we don't have the infrastructure that makes these highly saleable. So that's why I say we're putting the cart before the horse. If we had an infrastructure that would help them move these vehicles, great, but we're not there yet. And I think as a state, I think we can get there, but that's the problem. They're a dead sled.
Senator Osmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Thiebert, I know this to be a fact because out in my garage, I bought a 2019 Silverado in January of 2020. And granted, it was used as a little bit of a loaner and there were a few miles on it. But in order to get these off the lots, other than incentives from the manufacturer, which means the manufacturer has to basically give you money to help move them off the lot, you have to deeply discount, or in some cases, you may have to sell that car at a loss to get it out of your inventory so that you can have your next sales year get in. Is that a reasonable statement?
Mr. Thiebert.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. And that's why the mix of inventory that we have, and General Motors says in the next 5 years, we will have 30 units, very saleable. And I think the one presenter that mentioned that they weren't able to buy a vehicle, or maybe it was one of the senators, they're just 2 years, 3 years, just give it time. It is coming. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I thank God Minnesota wasn't built in a day. Let's take our time and do this correct.
Final question, Senator Osmick.
Well, a question and a statement. So, Mr. Thiebert, I mean, in essence, if these don't move off the lot and the next year's models are coming in and you have to sell vehicles at a loss, you're actually going to be subsidizing, or it's going to cost you money to actually have these vehicles on the lot. I mean, there's been some commentary by senators last year that this isn't going to cost anybody anything if we do this. But in reality, this is going to cost dealers significant amounts of money when these vehicles don't sell, because you're going to have to sell these somehow and get them off the lot. So these could be loss, is what some in the business world, these could be considered something called a loss leader. Is that correct, Mr. Thiebert?
Mr. Thiebert.
Yes, I would call it a loss leader. The sad thing is there's other ways to cut costs, and one of those for me is to lay people off. And if we're going to substitute having to take 20% of our inventory and have to take the 20 employees I got now and move it down to 15 to do something that doesn't happen naturally, I'm a little nervous.
Mr. Chair, one really quick question, then I'll make a statement. Mr. Thiebert, so I remember back in 1976, I know that I had a lot less gray hair then, but in 1976, my mom and dad wanted a car with a Landau roof. And in order to get that, they had to order it at the dealership. So what you're saying, and I think you alluded to it, but I just want to say it more clearly. If I wanted an electric SUV, I could go to a dealer who has that in the inventory for GM or Tesla or whatever. I could go to that dealership and order the car. It wouldn't necessarily be on the lot, but I can actually order the color, all of the equipment that goes onto it. It may take a few weeks or a month to get to me, but I can order any type of electric vehicle I want to, and it'll eventually come to me because dealers are in the dealers are in the game of selling you a car. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Mr. Thiebert.
Yes, it is. But I understand what Ann Johnson was saying, that right now there is not a lot of options. But like I said, be patient. In the next couple years, you are going to be able to order just about anything and everything. And the majority of the stuff I will be selling will be electric. But it's going to take a couple years to get there.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, final statement.
Very quickly, Senator.
I promise. That's what I'm trying to get to, is that if you want to purchase an electric vehicle in Minnesota, the market for electric vehicles continues to evolve. It used to be Tesla and that's it. Or for SUVs, I mean, Tesla's X SUV, actually, I don't think even went into production until about 2 years ago. Senator Dibble was with me out in San Francisco one time on a Legislative Energy Commission trip where we saw where they were just putting them on the line. They were just bringing the process online. So if you're looking for something that is an SUV, you may not have it just because the manufacturers don't have that yet, but they are in the process of doing it. And also, I just want to make a comment about a rather simplistic view of the energy grid. As most of the senators know that have been, are returning, I was the chair of the Energy Committee for 4 years. I was actually lead member on that committee for quite a while too. And to just simplistically say that we could just keep putting windmills and solar onto the grid and renewable energy like that onto the grid without creating a transmission problem. We have taken testimony from MISO, which is the grid network that serves the Minnesota area. We know for a fact that as you approach 20% renewables on the grid, you create something called a transmission issue. That is billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars worth of transmission issues. It isn't as easy as just building a windmill and you've got that extra electricity to go into electric cars. You suddenly are going to create such a demand issue if you continue to build more renewables onto the grid, that's going to cost us as ratepayers billions more dollars to be able to accomplish. Now, that's not saying we can't do it. We also, as far as I'm concerned, should probably put into place some more nuclear technology, but that's for a different committee. But the short answer is just making a simple statement of, well, let's just keep building windmills, that doesn't work. And finally, I have yet to hear anyone say what the net impact of having an electric car is on the 5.4 gigatons of carbon that goes in the atmosphere. And if we double, triple, quadruple our electric cars, what does that actually have for an impact? And that's where I'll leave it. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Osmick. Next on the list is Senator McEwen, and followed by Senator McEwen is Senator Carlson, but I see you're not muted. If you wouldn't mind muting Senator Carlson. And Mr. Thiebert, you are not muted. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself. We get feedback. Senator McEwen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and I know, the way that this has been set up, I was part of the Environmental Joint Committee yesterday, and we did hear from the MPCA and then also a lobbyist from the Center for an American Experiment. And that was very interesting information to receive, especially from the MPCA. It was good to hear from the people who have studied these rules and who really know the history behind the rules and who really know what's actually in the rules. And so having participated in that yesterday, it just really strikes me that a lot of the testimony, and I want to thank everybody for their testimony today. We appreciate so much hearing from each and every one of you. But a lot of the testimony that we have heard today in opposition to these rules is just flat out misinformed and wrong. And for example, this rule doesn't apply to farm equipment. For example, this is a mandate on manufacturers. It's not a mandate on dealers, and it's not a mandate on consumers. And it doesn't dictate that any dealer has to carry any of these vehicles. This is manufacturers could decide to bring all of these cars to the Twin Cities to start. And then another thing that I really think needs to be appreciated is the duration. This rule, I commented yesterday, is actually quite conservative, especially in light of the urgency with which we need to address the climate crisis. We all know that we have about 9 years to turn this ship around. Otherwise, the grand consensus of climate scientists around the world is that we are looking at catastrophe in terms of the global climate crisis. So we got 9 years. This rule, which by the way, I won't even go into that. This rule is very conservative in that the rulemaking will continue through 2021. There is a 2-year waiting period after that. And the first set of vehicles that this would apply to would be in 2025. That's a long time. I just heard somebody talk about how in a couple years, give us a couple years and we're going to have the infrastructure. We're going to be selling this. The free market is going to make this happen anyway. Well, great. The timing should be great then, because this mandate on manufacturers doesn't even fully go into effect until 2025. So, as an attorney, also, I just have to note that there's been a lot made of this boogeyman of California rules, California telling us what to do. That's a bunch of baloney, okay? That the reason that California, these standards are the California standards, is because they had got out in front and they had their standards before the federal government got on board and started doing this. So the federal government granted California an exemption. And so all of us are trying to catch up to where California went. There's a number of other states that have already done this. This is not a big deal. And just lastly, as a mother, I know that we've had some commentary today about the future and about safety for our children, right? People need to keep in mind that in Minnesota, if we're talking about water quality and where we can swim, we already have 40% plus of our waters in Minnesota that are not swimmable or fishable or drinkable. That is a stain on our state. This is the very least that we can do, the very, very minimum least. So I thank all of you for coming to testify today. And I know I get really worked up about this, but it's just, we're way behind. We should have been talking about rules like this 20 years ago. Really, really. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for your testimony today. Really, really very deeply appreciated.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. I would indicate that it's nearly 4:30 and I am going to end at 4:30. We have Senators Carlson, Kiffmeyer, Johnson, Stewart, and Dibble on deck. I will next recognize Senator Carlson, but please bear in mind at 4:30 we are going to adjourn. Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to turn my notes over to Senator McEwen because she's a lot more emotional than I am, and she did a great job in saying many of the things that I wanted to say. But I just had a couple of corrections, and some of you know that my daughter lives in California, and I visit there quite a bit, and I've done a lot of business there in my business career. And it seems like we always want to criticize California. And so I'd like to say, let's call this let's call it the Pennsylvania Clean Car Standard because they've adopted it. Or maybe the New York standard, they're a bigger state. Because this is not just California. And like Senator McEwen said, it was 2008 when the California Air Resources Board did the analysis of this and found that it was actually a very good policy to enact. And then we want to talk about also farm equipment. They're exempt. We don't need to talk about farm equipment. And by the way, just remember that California is a bigger agricultural producer than any other state in the nation. And then the last thing I guess I want to say is that California, it was said that California doesn't have an E85 standard, and they sure do. They are probably more, let's say, more militant on E85 than we are. In fact, I pulled something out here. Hey, Californians, we don't need to tell you all about the virtues of living in the Golden State, but here's the one you might not have heard. Our state has the most potent purest blend of E85 alcohol fuel you can buy. So, California does think ahead of a lot of us, and I guess we can be jealous of that, but we actually have to have the facts before we make some statements about something that isn't exactly true. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll let you go.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. Senator Kiffmeyer, you are up, and it is 4:27. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go quickly. First of all, a few facts. The MPCA has stated electric cars are cheaper in the long run to operate. Yeah, that's maybe true, but they're using the number $3 to $4 of a price of gas per gallon gas of price. So you can always make those numbers work unless you look at it and see what they really are. And then a few other things. Minnesota's air quality already meets the federal standard for protecting the vulnerable. We're really doing pretty good. During Governor Walz's shutdown order, vehicle traffic was down 40%, but air pollution was higher than the previous 5-year average. According to the MPCA website, light-duty trucks and passenger vehicles combined accounted for less than 15% of all GHG emissions in 2016. Another fact, MnDOT's forecast showed that gas usage has already hit its peak and is projected to decline. The market is working. After California, Hawaii is one of the states with the highest market share of electric vehicles, but they have not adopted the California Emission Standards. We can get there without using California. Currently, Pennsylvania, who has adopted these standards, have less of a market share for electric vehicles than Minnesota does. 9 of the 10 best-selling electric or plug-in hybrid cars in the U.S. are available in Minnesota, as are 12 out of the top 15. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Johnson Stewart, you are up next. You've got about 1 minute. But
Senator, I defer to Senator Dibble. He hasn't had a chance yet, so Senator, I'll yield my time.
Senator Dibble, where are you? I don't see you on the screen.
He's on my list.
Right here, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Senator Dibble, go ahead.
Right. I'm kind of in a quirky situation here with a family matter that we're tending to, so I'm actually in motion right now. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to just say a couple of quick things, but most of the points were already made by my colleagues who did a fantastic job. But I did want to respond to a couple of points that I think were pretty dramatic cases of misinformation or misperception. Arguments that somehow or another the market is going to magically cause all of this to happen. In the same breath, arguing for ethanol, which has, of course, only been brought about through standard. Even LEDs have tremendous amounts of market intervention in them with direct subsidies as well as conservation efficiency mandates. That's how the LED technology was brought to market. It is now coming to scale and coming to its own, which is a great thing, and everyone agrees on that. The other points, the fact that this is not a California mandate, this has been adopted by many, many other states. This was actually on track to become the federal mandate until, at the behest of the oil companies, the Trump administration reversed this standard. You can't get away from the costs of climate, the costs of public health. There's a lot of talk about costs. A lot of those costs are simply externalized and foisted upon the rest of us in decreased health and, of course, the dramatic effects that climate is going to have on our economy and our ability to prosper and thrive. And I think Senator McEwen made the point, but it bears repeating, this constant refrain of misinformation that this is a per dealer mandate. It's not. It's a manufacturer mandate. So this argument that 20% of the cars on a particular dealer lot are going to be given over to this technology is just simply not true. And the fact is, and we hear from consumers and manufacturers time and again that they can't get the cars that they want here in the state, and they're not going to bring the cars into the state until there's the economic signal, that is assisted by public policy. And the infrastructure, of course, isn't going to precede where the cars are. That is another fallacious argument. And rulemaking is absolutely a public process. It's very open, very public, and people have the ability to participate in rule writing. So, when it's all added up, the economic arguments and the policy arguments on the other side are built on things that simply have been debunked, and this is a really, really good direction to move. I think, quite frankly, the the conversation is going to be moot here very quickly with the advent of the new administration in Washington, and I look forward to that day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. With that, we are out of time. I want to thank each and every one of the testifiers that have come in today. It was important, I think, to hear from the public, be you for or against the rulemaking process and the adoption of the rules. So again, thank you very much for coming here today. And with that, we are adjourned.